This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
Inflation in March 2025 rose to 24.23% after two consecutive drops since the start of the year. The latest figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics (NBS) shows a 1.85 increase from February, with food inflation continuing to drive the numbers upward. For more analysis on this, we're joined by Marcel Okeke, former chief economist at Zenith Bank PLC. Mr. Okeke, good morning. Thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on this program today.
So this is the first rise that we've seen this year. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, my initial thought is that there's no surprise about it. It's what we expect to happen. As a matter of fact, the increase is quite minimal. We expected something, bigger because the fundamentals, that drive inflation are still, at work. Nothing has changed. Whatever drop we had in the past 2 months or previous, months before March, as a result of the rebasing of the consumer price index calculation. That was what happened, and that was what gave a rise. Gave space to the drop that is being reported. But what we have now is what should be. Thank you.
Mr. Okeke, it's interesting you say that because when the inflation figures were published in January after the rebasing, the authorities had said, look, we would have seen a drop whether we rebased or not. So, and it was a surprise, especially because the end of the year tends to see increased activity and spending across the country. And we have typically in the past seen a rise in inflation to reflect just what happened between November, December, and so on. So when you say that it was expected, how do you then view the authorities saying that we would have still seen the decrease anyway?
Well, it's not just for the authority to say what they are saying. It's another thing for us who are, informed economic analysts, to see what we are seeing and to report what we are reporting. And that thing we've been reporting is what is showing up now, because you can see that food inflation, largely, that is still driving, the headline inflation. What has changed, between the end of last year, when inflation was almost at 5%. And when they adjusted it, they say it came down to 24 point something. Okay? And then we now started moving from there. So it's now going up again. And that food inflation is still very, very serious, among other factors. Okay? So that is why I said I'm not surprised. And even going forward, we still expect, increases, at a faster pace because of what is on ground.
One of the things that we point to when we talk about food inflation rising is the cost of transportation, because of course farmers need to move the produce from their farms to the markets. And in for much of this year, what we saw was that the cost of fuel was actually decreasing, even though we had an increase just very recently. Do you think, I'm curious as to how we start to calculate the factors, or what are the important things to look at that are driving food prices up if the cost of transportation is supposedly reducing?
Well, thank you for saying supposedly. Was it really reducing? When the Naira for crude arrangement or deal collapsed, you saw how pump price of PMI, was adjusted upwards. And so once it was adjusted upwards, it filtered into cost of transportation, at various levels, in the policy. That is one. The second point is that, the insecurity in the land has converted most of the farmers, especially in the areas we call food baskets of the nation, converted them, to residents of internally displaced persons camps. So where are the farmers? Who is farming? Insecurity has not allowed them. Terrorism, if you like. Harassment activities, and so on and so forth. So the outcome is what we are seeing in the figures and the numbers. And all these things have not in any way started abating. So that is why, if you factor in, the spillover or multiply effect of the tariff war that is setting in globally, then you can see that we look forward to increases in the rate of inflation. Thank you.
Would it be possible, Mr. Okeke, to give a sense of just how high these increases and the inflation numbers could climb?
Well, some of the factors are not within the control of Nigeria. So that is why it may not be specific. But the point you have to note is that we expect it to keep going up. You understand? Something like the tariff I have mentioned now, it's not really obvious how badly it's going to affect Nigeria, because the issues are still subject to negotiations and discussions, but you can also already see, the impact in terms of the price of oil in the international market, how it has gone down, far below the benchmark that we use for this year's budget, which is at $5 per barrel. Now we are at around 60, if not below. You understand? And so these things are still at play. And once you have that challenge in terms of foreign exchange inflow into this economy, you know what that means. Because our major problem is shortage or scarcity of FX, and demand always outstripping supply. So once that goes on happening, you can then see that a lot of negative effects will come in, including rise in inflation.
Mr. Okeke, these the inflation figures, they're coming at a time when we've been talking about other macroeconomic indicators. And we're talking about the Bretton Woods institutions that are saying that, look, our policies are still headed in the right direction. Very recently, we had Fitch ratings review us to stable status. All of these things are coming. The CBN governor has talked about how our foreign exchange reserves have also climbed. These are some of the pluses and wins they've been touting in the last few weeks or so. Meanwhile, inflation figures are probably a greater indicator of microeconomics and what's really happening on the ground. How do we then reconcile these macroeconomic wins with the inflation figures that are saying that things are pinching Nigerians?
Well, you are quoting Bretton Woods institutions and the central bank governor. Well, for me, those things are self-adulation. They are praising themselves. I said earlier on that the fundamentals, have not in any way improved. And so because of that, the future, what we are looking at is so dreary, that the policy makers really have to go back to the drawing board. And if you recall, the finance minister has said so, in view of a lot of things happening out there, in the wider society, that's beyond the control of Nigeria. And so for the World Bank, IMF to be saying what they are saying, well, they know what their interest is. Because if you look at some indicators, is this the external loans, you know how far it has ballooned and where we are. And when you talk about servicing it, is it the deficit that will now go up because of the shortage in terms of revenue inflow, forex inflow? Is it inflation that we're talking about now? Is it the exchange rate? And we have the problem. Of course, you see the exchange rate is going back to 1,600, from 1.5 something or almost getting to 1,400. You understand? So you can mention them. And none of them gives us any hope of anything better in the future or the near term. So that's the situation.
With these figures, the last time the CBN Monetary Policy Committee sat, they voted to hold the interest rate at 27.50%. Now that we've seen a first increase in 2025, do you expect that by the time they're sitting for the next meeting, they might consider an upward review of the interest rate?
I don't think so, because again, a lot of things are yet unfolding, both domestically and externally. So our position should be let them still watch it. Because like I said, for instance, the imposition of 14% tariff on Nigeria by the Trump administration and they claimed that Nigeria was imposing 27% on American goods and all that. So all those things could be discussed at diplomatic tables. Nothing is cast in stone. You understand? So there could be adjustments here and there. And by the time all these are done, then we come to see the reality. And so because of that, a lot of things are not yet clear. That's the way I would say it.
Mr. Okeke, thank you very much for your time and expertise on this conversation. Marcel Okeke is a former chief economist at Zenith Bank PLC. He joined us this morning to speak on the latest inflation figures for March 2025, which have risen up to 24.23 trillion naira following two consecutive drops since the start of the year. You're still listening to Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos. We urge you to stay tuned. In a few short moments, our conversations continue right here on Now Breakfast.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.